Following their disastrous defeat at Stalingrad during the winter of 1942-43, the German armed forces launched a climactic offensive in the east, known as Operation Citadel, on July 4, 1943. Operation Citadel called for a double envelopment, directed at Kursk, to surround the Soviet defenders and seal off the salient. The Battle of Kursk, the climax of Operation Citadel, involved up to 6,000 tanks, 4,000 aircraft and 2 million fighting personnel, and is remembered as one of the largest tank battle in history, and was the German army's final attempt to slow down the Soviet military. Prior to the battle, both sides worked feverishly to bring the units involved up to full strength by replacing troops, upgrading equipment, and conducting training. The Germans repeatedly delayed the attack in order to deploy their new armored vehicles. Intelligence was gathered by Soviet authorities both from their own sources and via Ultra, the codename for British intelligence gathered from the German Enigma machine. Field Marshal Erich von Manstein, the commander of the German units in the south, had wanted to attack in March, preferring a more flexible plan, and while the delay meant more tanks were available, all surprise had been lost, and the Soviets had time to build strong defenses. The Battle of Kursk began on July 4, 1943, with a German attack in the south to acquire artillery observation. On July 5, the Germans launched an attack on both shoulders of the Kursk salient. Both the German pincers, one from the north commanded by Walter Model, and the other from the south commanded by von Manstein with Hermann Hoth in charge of the 4th Panzer Army, met with fierce resistance from entrenched Soviet forces. The fight was furious. The front lines in the north immediately stabilized, but German forces made progress in the south. The critical moment occurred on July 12, when they reached the village of Prokhorovka. The II SS Panzer Corps and the Soviet 5th Guards Tank Army clashed in a massive battle of armored vehicles, with hundreds of tanks lost on both sides. Prokhorovka is one of the most well-known of the many battles on the Eastern Front during World War II. Articles, books, and TV documentaries have all been presented about it, but the accuracy of these accounts varies. Some are just incomplete, while others border on fiction. While historians have labeled Prokhorovka as a victory of improved Soviet tactics versus German firepower and heavy tanks, new evidences reveal that the Germans were closer to victory at Kursk than previously believed. In the generally accepted version of the battle, the 3 SS divisions of the 2nd SS Panzer Corps attacked Prokhorovka shoulder to shoulder, jamming the area between the Sel River and the adjacent railroad. Supposedly, between 500 and 700 panzers approached, including scores of Mark V Panthers and Mark VI Tigers, only to be ambushed by swarms of T-34s which penetrated the German armored columns, creating total havoc. The Germans suffered a humiliating defeat as a result of the Soviet tank forces' bold tactics, and the disorganized SS divisions withdrew, leaving 400 destroyed tanks behind, including between 70 to 100 Tigers and numerous Panthers. The SS division's fighting power was shattered as a result of these losses, and Hoth's 4th Panzer Army had no prospect of achieving even a partial victory in the south. The issue with this dramatic account is that practically all of this battle scenario is essentially closer to myth than to historical facts. Reading the 2nd SS Panzer Corps' combat records and daily tank strength reports, both of which can be accessed on microfilm at the National Archives in Washington, D.C., demands a historical revision of the battle. To begin with, General Paul Hauser's II SS Panzer Corps began with significantly fewer tanks than the numbers claimed, and more importantly, on July 12, 1943, they sustained only minor losses. These reports were prepared for the Corps commander to estimate the strength of the forces ready for action, so it could be trusted. Given that information, it appears that the Germans were on the verge of a limited success on the southern flank of the salient. The number of German panzers involved in the action was reported to be between 300 and 700. The 2nd SS Panzer Corps, on the other hand, had never had 500 tanks, let alone 700, before the Battle of Kursk began. Hauser's 3 divisions had a total of 327 battle tanks, including a few command tanks, on the day before Operation Citadel commenced. The 2nd SS Panzer Corps had 211 panzers on July 11, with Totenkopf having 94, Das Reich having 61, and Leibstandarte possessing only 56. There were only about 15 Tigers in action at Prokhorovka, and no SS Panthers were available. In July 1943, the battalions equipped with Panthers were still training in Germany. On July 13, after Prokhorovka, the 4th Panzer Army report stated that the 2nd SS Panzer Corps had 163 tanks ready for combat, resulting in a net loss of 48 tanks. Actual losses were slightly higher, with the discrepancy attributable to the gain of repaired tanks returning to service. A closer look at the losses of each type of tank reveals that on July 12, the Corps lost around 70 tanks. Still, the usual assumption, hundreds of German tanks burning on the steppes, is a long way off. Another misconception about the battle is the supposedly crowded attack of the 3 SS divisions through the corridor between the cell and the railroad, received by a swarm of T-34s. Only Leibstandarte advanced on this narrow lane west of Prokhorovka, and it did so after beating back Soviet offensives. In contrast, the Soviet losses, which were reported as minimal by many sources, were in reality catastrophic. The 5th Guards were battered so badly by German armored units that their commander General Pavel Rotmistrov called off the offensive and ordered his surviving tanks to stay put among the infantry positions to the west. According to History of the 5th Guards Tank Army, authored by Rotmistrov himself in 1984, the army lost 400 tanks to repairable damage on July 12. While he conveniently omits estimates for destroyed or non-salvageable tanks, evidence suggests that hundreds more tanks were destroyed. According to other Soviet sources, the Army's tank strength on July 13 was between 150 and 200, indicating a loss of around 650 tanks. Drawing on the work of historians at the Research Institute for Military History in Potsdam, particularly Karl-Heinz Frieser, and comparing their findings to aerial photographs taken by the Luftwaffe, and now housed in the U.S. National Archive, British historian Ben Wheatley came to the startling conclusion that the Russians lost 255 tanks, compared to only a handful of Panzer IVs and 1 Tiger for the Germans. The photos were taken in the days following the battle, when the Germans still had control of the battlefield. Others shot 3 weeks later confirm magnitude of the Soviet disaster. As a result, he concludes that the conflict ends in a comprehensive defeat for Soviet armor rather than a stalemate. The need for Lieutenant General Rotmistrov to explain the severe losses incurred by the army under his command to Stalin, who was not known for being tolerant of bad news, was the foundation of the Prokhorovka myth. As a result, he claimed that, while the number of Russian tanks destroyed was significant, it was more than offset by the German loss of 400 tanks, including 70 Tigers. Stalin publicly accepted Rotmistrov's version of events, yet the fact that he sent Malenkov to investigate the general's version implies that he had his doubts. Subsequently, the depleted 5th Guards Tank Army did not resume offensive action, and Rotmistrov ordered his remaining tanks to dig in among the infantry positions west of the town. Hitler decided to cancel Operation Citadel after learning of the Allied invasion of Sicily and reports of expected Soviet attacks on the Meuse River and at Izium. Von Manstein still had some unused reserves, especially 3 battle-hardened panzer divisions from the 24th Panzer Corps, which could be utilized to flank the 5th Guards Tank Army. Because all of the Soviet tank units in the south were already overburdened, they couldn't afford to send any units to assist the 5th Guards, lest their own defenses collapse. Von Manstein argued that he should be given the authority to finish off the 2 Soviet tank armies. Hitler, on the other hand, could not be persuaded to continue the offensive. Instead, Hitler dispersed the II SS Panzer Corps divisions to deal with expected Soviet diversionary attacks south of the Belgorod-Kharkiv sector. The Corps retreated from its positions around Prokhorovka on the night of July 17 to 18. Thus, the battle for Prokhorovka ended because Hitler lacked the resolve to continue the offensive, not because of German tank losses. The SS Panzer divisions were still fighting. In fact, 2 of them fought effectively for the rest of the summer in southern Russia. This reassessment of the battle raises questions about possible German victories, if Manstein's panzer reserves had been used as intended. If Hitler had allowed von Manstein to continue his attack on the 2 Soviet tank armies in the Prokhorovka area, he may have scored a victory even more devastating to the Soviets than the counterattack that had recaptured Kharkiv in March 1943. Had the Germans succeeded in grounding down the Russians while keeping their fighting strength, they still would not have won the war, but they might have achieved a stalemate. However, Hitler's reluctance in ordering the attack gave the Russians enough time to prepare, making a decisive victory practically impossible for the Germans. His losing his nerve and stopping the battle in progress, retreating an entire Panzer Corps in the process, sealed the fate of the battle and the war. The Wehrmacht would never again launch a major offensive in the east. If you have enjoyed watching the video, please subscribe and support the channel for more. Many thanks for watching.